Well, hey, good morning and welcome to the journey. I really do appreciate everyone here coming today and really hope that everyone here enjoys it, has a good time, and want you to know that wherever you're at on your journey, wherever you're at, whatever you believe, you don't have to agree with me, anything like that. You're welcome here, and we're glad that you're here, and really we hope you get a lot out of today and that you just be lifted up today. And definitely those connection cards in front of you, we do appreciate if you do fill them out. And I just send you an email and just kind of connect with you, let you know what's going on with the journey, and feel free to jump in or not, but we'd love for you to jump in. So there's someone I just want to welcome as well, and his name is Gordon Slider. He's sitting back there. I want you to go ahead and stand. He's the only one who's actually somewhat dressed up today. He pastors Treasure Valley Worship Center in Meridian and oversees the Foursquare churches in southern Idaho, of which the journey is a part. And the reason he's visiting today is because he's gotten tired of the people in his church, and he heard that we're having a food fest today. And so, we're just glad that you're here, and, but either that or he just wants to make sure I'm not teaching heresy. I'm not sure which one it is, but I know that I'm probably not scoring very many points with him right now. But anyway, so welcome, and we hope that you have a good time today. So this morning we continue with our series called He Said What? He Said What? Okay. Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at some of the crazy sounding, shocking, extreme, and in your face, I just can't believe he said that, statements that Jesus made when he walked this planet. Statements that people had never heard before. Statements that grabbed attention. Statements that made people think, made others angry, caused many to drop him like a bad habit, okay? He said things that just ticked people off. He said things that challenged people. He said things that gave people a double take. I mean, he said so many things like that, things that made some people wonder if Jesus maybe had turned just a little bit too much water into wine, spending a little much time there, Jesus, But things like, if you really want to live, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. That's where real life is at. And the response, in people's hearts, I do like my steak medium rare, but I think I'll stick with beef, Jesus, not you, okay? Or things like, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, okay? He didn't use like mamby-pamby terms there, and chop, chop, scoop is what he's talking about, right? And people were like, were you mistreated as a child, Jesus? Because you sound kind of violent, Or love your enemies and pray for those who hurt you. What are you, crazy, Jesus? Flipping them off works just fine for me. Thank you very much. But that's how people may have reacted. That's when you first heard those statements. What are you talking about? And Jesus often said outrageous and shocking things. But unlike someone like me who says crazy things just for shock value, Jesus had purpose in what he said. He wanted us to see things through a new set of lenses. He wanted us to live differently and to benefit from the new way of life. And so I invite you, if you haven't been here, to check out our website for past talks and listen to and get caught up in the series if you'd like to do that. If you're a spiritually curious person here, or someone who's searching for spiritual answers, looking at these statements of Jesus gives us an opportunity to see more of who Jesus actually is. He's not just some good guy that made his mark in history because he loved people. A lot of people have loved people, okay? He's so much more than a Mr. Rogers in robes or the male version of Mother Teresa, all right? He's a lot more than that. And we so often picture Jesus as someone who's either still stuck on the cross and doesn't know how to get down, or someone who smiles and winks at everything that we do, always just kind of patting us on the back and, man, good job, attaboy, kind of the attaboy Jesus, right? And we like the attaboy Jesus because he makes us feel good about ourselves. But he's more than that. And he wants us to know him as who he is and what he's calling us to. He has so much, we have been created for more. And he says, rise up, rise to it, and follow me. And so Jesus has some challenging things. So the title of the talk today is 490 and then some, okay? No, the 490 has nothing to do with the 49ers. Although maybe Jesus was thinking about, I don't know. Anyway, so we're going to show a video clip to introduce the talk today. And so go ahead and roll it.
But I had no choice.
We always have a choice. You had a choice when you killed my uncle.
My daughter was dying. I needed money. I was scared. I told your uncle all I wanted was the car.
What is it? I need your car.
He said to me, "Why don't you just put down the gun and go home?" I realize now he was just trying to help me. Then I saw my partner running over with the cash, and the gun was in my hand. Did a terrible thing to you. I spent a lot of nights wishing I could take it back. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to understand.
I've done terrible things too.
I didn't choose to be this. The only thing left to me now is my daughter.
I forgive you.
So today we're going to look at forgiveness, in case you were wondering. Great clip. Love that the end of that scene, or the end of that movie actually, because it's just powerful, and especially if you watch the movie all the way up to that, and or even the whole trilogy where Spider-Man was just so incredibly bitter towards the murderer of his uncle, and because he loved his uncle so much, and to see that forgiveness, but. Forgiveness is powerful. It's powerful both if you do forgive and if you don't forgive. And Jesus had plenty to say about forgiveness. What he said was shocking, actually. And so one day while Jesus was teaching about relationships and confronting someone who had sinned against you or offends you, Peter decides to ask a question. And Peter was someone who didn't always think before he spoke. Okay, he was just kind of one of those, speak first, think later kind of guys. But this time he thought things through a little bit more, okay, a little bit more. He was tired of looking stupid, and he wanted Jesus to think highly of him, and, which makes sense. And so Peter asked Jesus, "Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me?" And wanting to impress Jesus with his generosity and look like a spiritual giant, he thought he'd use a big number. He said, "Up to 7 times?" right? And so Jesus said, and it'll be on the screen, no, Jesus replied, 70 times 7. And you can imagine Peter, big old eyes, 70 times. That's 490 times. How can I keep track of that? To which Jesus would say, precisely, and then some, right? In other words, don't ever set a limit on forgiveness, no matter what it is, and no matter how many times. And Peter and the other followers of Christ must have thought, that's insane. Nobody deserves to be forgiven that many times. And surely there are some sins and offenses that are just too big to be forgiven, aren't there, Jesus? I mean, just too big, like murder or betrayal, prostitution, showing up at Mike's house and cheering for the New York Giants last week. I mean, some of those things are just too big, right? And Jesus followed up his shocking statement with a parable, okay, or story of just how crucial it is to forgive people without limits. And the parable itself was shocking to his listeners. But before we look at that parable, let's look a little bit at the trap of offense. And there's a green sheet in your handout. If you'd like to take notes, you can follow along and or doodle or whatever you want to do. So, but it's there, and there's pens in the seats in front of you. So the first point is everyone gets offended. Okay, everyone. I don't care who you are or what kind of spiritual giant you think you are. Everyone has been offended and will be offended again. Okay? And Jesus said so. In the New Testament book of Luke 17, he said that would happen, that we would be offended, that people would sin against us. And so often we act so surprised, right? He offended me. I can't believe she offended me. How could that happen? And Jesus said it would happen, okay? So chill out. But why? For one, there are offensive people in our lives, whether family or friends or coworkers or strangers or parents or kids, lawyers, doctors, politicians, some people are offensive, like this guy that we're going to see in the next video clip. It is kind of offensive.
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Does a former drill sergeant make a terrible therapist?
And that's why yellow makes me sad, I think.
That's interesting. You know what makes me sad? You do! Maybe we should chug on over to Mamby-Pamby land where maybe we can find some self-confidence for you, you jackwagon! Tissue? Bye, baby.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
So some people are naturally offensive, okay, to others. But the other reason is that, we are people who are easily offended. It's just part of our fallen human nature. We are easily offended. Simple things that don't even matter sometimes. The way people dress. Oh, the pastor is wearing jeans and a 49er shirt in church. I'm so offended, Well, good for you. Or the way someone talks or the look on someone's face. Did you see how she was looking at me? I'm so offended, right? Or he has more money than me, or a nicer house or bigger house. I'm offended, right? The way people drive, they're either too fast or they're too slow. He took my right of way. I'm so offended. The moron just made me miss a green light. I'm offended, right? Certain less than holy hand signals that are given on the freeway, and we get offended. In fact, I've lost count how many times I've gotten the Angry Bird flipped at me while driving, because I must be an offensive driver, I think. I'm always concerned that in my rush to get from point A to point B, that as I pass somebody on the road, I'm concerned that they would recognize my car and say, isn't that the pastor of the journey? He just passed me up and gave me a dirty look. I'm offended, or something. I mean, I get offended, but we get offended by so many things. We get offended, with people on Facebook and Twitter posting dumb things, or we get into a religious or political argument and someone gets offended on Facebook, right? Not too long ago, my dad's cousin defriended me on Facebook because she got offended at me. Okay, I've never been defriended. I didn't think I was that bad of a guy, but I got defriended. I'm so offended. But there are opportunities to be offended everywhere, whether the offense is meant for us or not. I've been offended in silly places like Walmart. There's just no customer service around here. What do you expect? You're at Walmart. Don't get offended, right? We get offended at the store, on the road, at work, in the park, at school, at church, at home, on vacation. I remember about 4 years ago, we were at Disney in Florida, and this lady came on one of those little scooters, little that you can either rent a stroller for your baby or rent a scooter if you can't walk around or whatever, right? And they're just they're everywhere. I mean, they're like everywhere. And so this one lady just comes barreling up, and toots her dumb little horn at my 2-year-old daughter Brielle. Scares her. She drops her pizza and freaks out. I got offended. I almost ran and caught up with her to push her over, just to show her. I mean, that was going through my mind, right? Now I've offended people too. Okay, times, gosh, when I was in high school and I'd be on the phone late at night with some girl that I liked, or she was interested in me, but then she'd be talking on and on and on, and it's late, and I started dozing off, and and I hear this, Mike, are you falling asleep? No, not me. No. Just kind of distracted. That's all, But I'm sure I offended some people, or them or her or whoever. But, some offenses and wounds obviously go much deeper than the ones I just mentioned. The closer the relationship, the deeper the hurt, the more severe the offense, and the greater the pain. Attorneys will tell you that the most vicious cases are in divorce courts. Countless people today are living with unhealed wounds from an abusive or absent mom or dad or sibling or family member that is just paining them. The home, which is meant to be a shelter of protection, provision, and growth, where we are supposed to learn love and laughter and learn to give and receive, has often become the very root of our pain. Intense pain, intense disappointment, and offense that still affects and infects our lives today. And so let's look at this next point here. Refusing to forgive or holding on to offense is a trap. Okay? It's a trap. It's a trap that's often set by the enemy of our souls. It's a trap that is often unnoticed and incredibly difficult to get out of. It's a very dangerous and deadly trap. There are at least two things that are common or true about any trap. Number one, it must be hidden or not recognized for what it is, in hopes that, for example, an animal will stumble into it. And two, there must be bait in the trap. Okay, a trap that's recognized or a trap without bait is useless. Okay, so it has to have those two things: not recognized and useless. This summer, while we were camping up in Call, I was taking a nap in our camping trailer when all of a sudden I heard this, afternoon I heard this, ka-thump, got him! And then I hear two little girl voices, oh, let me go see, and so I got up to go see what my son Michael had caught, and he had caught a freaked out little gray-black squirrel in a tote. And so he had set up he got this plastic tote, and he turned it upside down. He had the lid underneath, and he put a little stick there, tied a rope to it, and he put crackers and whatever other things. I can't remember what he puts in there, but he put bait in there. And he just sat there patiently waiting, just watching. Maybe he was in the tree, I think. And I'm there sleeping, and then whoosh, he got the squirrel, and the thing was freaked out. I'll tell you, because he turned it over, and the little claws are trying to get out, and so we had it for about 15 minutes, and then, well, what should we do with it? I'm like, dude, just let it go. How do we do that? You take off the lid, Okay, and so the thing is just running circles around in there. So he takes off the lid, and it was just so funny. He was on the log, takes off the lid, and all of a sudden you see this squirrel just take this flying leap like this. Had no idea where it was going to land, but it was free, and boom, just took off. But when it comes to being offended, often a person doesn't realize that they are trapped because they're so focused on the bait. They're so focused on the wound or the hurt or whatever is done to them. Or maybe they're focused on the sense of control or the feeling of power and justification that comes with being offended. And they're trapped. And one way that a person is kept in the trap and in an offended state is that the offense is kept hidden. It's cloaked with pride. Pride will always keep a person from admitting their true condition. Always will. Back a number of years ago, we were at the San Francisco Zoo, and I think Wendy remembers this. I don't know if our kids do or not, and I wish I had this video camera because we were watching the gorillas. We had a video camera. I just didn't have it turned on. We were watching the gorillas, and there was this one gorilla that was like swinging from one tree to another, and it was a big, hefty old thing was swinging and it was hanging on this branch and, showing off for the lady gorilla, I guess. And all of a sudden you hear this snap, crack, and the whole branch just breaks. Okay, and this is a large branch. He falls 10 feet flat on his back. I'm like, laughing, and the thing jumps up and starts, doing his chest thing and acting all macho, like nothing happened here, the poor dude was in pain, okay? But what an image of pride, okay? Apes have pride, and so do we, I guess. But, it's not different with us. I know, for example, I know what Jesus says about forgiveness. I know it's wrong to not forgive. I know it's harmful to refuse to forgive and remain offended. But there have been times when I've denied or repressed the hurt and the offense that was in my heart that I was feeling. After all, I like to think of myself as, an easygoing guy, kind of go with the flow, not easily offended. Besides, I'm a pastor. I should always forgive, right? Those kinds of things. But instead of actually forgiving, I would just convince myself that I'm not offended, when in reality, I was. Pride would mask the true condition of my heart. And it's so common with us that happens. Pride keeps us from dealing with the truth. It distorts our vision. It hardens the heart and deceives the mind. We never change because we're deceived into thinking that everything is okay and everything is fine. Next, offense leads to terrible places. Okay, terrible places. And those terrible places always come with a high cost. When we refuse to forgive and properly deal with offense, we remain wounded. And that alone affects every area of our lives. It dictates our actions, our feelings, our attitudes, how we think, and even how we pray. Right? We get tempted to pray some of those prayers that King David prayed in the Psalms, right? God, slay all my enemies. Crush them in defeat. Send the IRS to their door. May they gain 500 pounds and strike them with the runs all the day of their lives, And we get those kinds of, in our minds. And we start thinking thoughts like that or wishing we could pray like that. And that's not good when we get to those places. Refusing to forgive cripples our ability to see clearly, to move forward, and to have faith. It's like a filter that gets placed over our hearts, over our minds, over our eyes, so that everything that we experience is colored by that wound or that offense that's in here, if we don't deal with it. And the fruit of offense shows up as all kinds of things: hurt, anger, rage, jealousy, resentment, envy, bitterness, hatred, outbursts of anger, broken relationships, insults, falling away from God. Those are the kinds of things that come out of an unforgiving heart and offense. Bitterness is so deceitful and destructive. We think we're in control. We feel powerful. I'm not going to let that person ever hurt me again, right? We think we're powerful. We think we're justified. But in reality, the other person has control. And we're powerless. We're in prison and we're dying inside. Just like that one quote, one saying, I don't know who said it, but bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It's so deceitful. Let's look real quick at some differences between a forgiving person and an offended person, okay? And as we look at these, resist the temptation of thinking about people you know, okay? But see where you fit on this, all right? And it'll be on the screen. It's not in your handout, but it'll be on the screen. So a forgiving person and an offended or wounded person. First of all, a forgiving person is vulnerable, okay? An offended person has walls up around their heart and around their life. They don't want to let anyone in. And the deeper the wound, the bigger and stronger those walls are. And we keep people out, even the good things out. We keep God out, okay? A forgiving person next is humble. An offended, wounded person is prideful. A forgiving person has a soft heart towards people and towards God. A wounded person has a hard heart. And an offended person has a hard heart. A forgiving person trusts God and can trust others. An offended person trusts only himself or herself. A forgiving person says, God protects me. And an offended person says, I protect me. A forgiving person says, pain makes me better. An offended person says, pain makes me bitter, though sometimes they don't admit that. A forgiving person but with a forgiving person, pain is embraced. An offended person, pain is resisted at all costs. A forgiving person has a submitted will, a will that's submitted to God. An offended person has a defiant will, rebellious, especially in the area of the wound. Let me tell you, I know that one well. A forgiving person forgives. An offended person holds on to offenses. A forgiving person is governed by God's Spirit. An offended person is governed by feelings. A forgiving person lives by the truth. An offended person listens to lies. A forgiving person takes responsibility, and an offended person blames others, especially for the pain. We can blame other people. We can blame God, blame our parents, blame whomever else it is. And let me tell you, when I say these things because I've been them, and I've experienced them, and I do still at times, okay? And a forgiving person can hear God's voice. An offended person is often deaf to God's voice. A forgiving person is strong. An offended person appears strong, but isn't. And last, a forgiving person is healed. And an offended person has a well-covered but infected wound. Looks healed on the outside, but it isn't. And if we're honest and we look at ourselves and we look at our culture, there's such a hardness today, such woundedness and offense. It's like this has become the new normal. Okay? And for these reasons and more, Jesus says, forgive. 490 times and then some. I want you free from this trap, free from this burden, and free from the pain. Students, you're sitting in here today. If you can start getting these things down at your age, it's going to be a lot easier when you get older, okay? Look at any adult, and any adult would say, yeah, that's true, okay? If you are, and for some of you here, this is brand new stuff. Others for you, it's a desperately needed reminder. If you're a seeker or you're a spiritually curious person, as I mentioned, I'm glad that you're here, and I hope all this makes sense. And while these next points are mostly directed at Christ followers, there are things that can benefit you because this is a powerful concept here. So let's look at reasons to forgive, okay? And let's go on with that story, that parable that Jesus mentioned after this. He said this, it'll be on the screen. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owned him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Okay, now back in the day, 10,000 talents was a ton of cash, okay? A talent of gold was about 75 pounds. And so if you do the math, I mean, that's like 750,000 pounds of gold. You're like, is there that much in this world? I don't know. Maybe there is. But that was a lot. And we're talking about billions of dollars here that was owed. And Jesus is emphasizing this guy owed a debt that he would never, ever be able to repay. Okay? He wasn't Bill Gates, and he was even more than what Bill Gates might be able to repay. Okay, so he goes on. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and children and all that and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. I think his wife may have had some regrets at that point. But anyway, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. You know, when an offense happens, a debt is owed. You know, we've all heard it. I heard someone say it, he'll pay for that, you'll pay for this, right? There's a debt that's owed when there's an offense. And so forgiveness is like the cancellation of debt. But what an amazing cancellation of debt, okay? And so this next point is forgive because you have been forgiven, right? Why should we forgive? Because we've been forgiven. And in this story, the king represents God the Father, and Jesus illustrates that God has forgiven us, and specifically those with faith in Christ, of a debt that none of us could ever pay. That his salvation is a free gift for us through Christ, and it's a gift that is worth far more than we could ever imagine, okay? A gift that we could never pay for ourselves. And let's read on. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. And his fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. Now, a denarius was a small amount of money, okay, or smaller. And back in the day, it was maybe worth about a day's wages, okay? And so 100 denarii was actually a considerable amount of cash, okay? Maybe like 10 to 20,000 bucks in today's money, okay? So depending on how much a person makes. It was significant. But compared to billions, it was nothing, right? $10,000 to $20,000. And Jesus is saying, I understand that you have offenses, that you guys have offenses with each other, and that your offenses are real, and your offenses are big in your eyes, and they're meaningful, and they have value. They aren't insignificant. But you have to understand that when you compare the offenses that God has forgiven you of, yours are infinitely small. Infinitely small. The price that God has paid to forgive you in so much is so much greater than you will ever fathom. And if God has been so good and gracious to you and all that he's forgiven you and me of, should we not extend grace and forgiveness to those around us, regardless of what they have done? And he goes on, he says this, when the other servants saw what happened, they were greatly distressed, and when they told their master, and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" And something that's true about Christianity, that Christianity is built upon, it's forgiveness. It's foundational. Mercy, grace, and forgiveness. It's foundational to the message of Christ. It's central. Not just in what Jesus taught, but in what God himself gives to everyone who asks. Forgiveness is where it all begins. Mercy and grace are the reasons anything good happens from God to us, is because of his mercy and his grace and his forgiveness. It's why Jesus was able to do miracles. It's why he still does miracles in lives today. And so when a person refuses to extend forgiveness to somebody else, that action in itself is anti-Christian. It suffocates the life that God has for us and that he wants us to have for other people, that he wants to do through us. Which is why Jesus finished the story, showing God's intense dissatisfaction with that servant and the consequences. And here's how he finished it. Then the angry king sent the man to prison until he had paid every penny. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. In some translations, like the NIV, it says that the man was sent to prison to be tormented. Okay? That's mean, Mike. People who are unforgiving and bitter and offended are some of the most tormented people you will ever meet. Just are. The more unforgiving, the more trapped they are. The deeper the prison, and the more terrible the pain. The bitterness just seems to control them, even if they aren't aware of it. And it's not just internal, but it's also physical. Medical doctors and scientists have linked unforgiveness and bitterness with a number of diseases, such as high blood pressure, arthritis, cancer, and mental illness. The state of unforgiveness seems to remove us from being in a place where God's mercy and blessing and life and healing can flow when we refuse to forgive. And that's not what Jesus wants. He wants us to be free and to be in a place where we can continue to receive everything that God has for us. Okay? So next point here is forgive so that you can be free. See, forgiveness is freedom. It is freedom to the nth degree. We're set free from the control of bitterness. We're set free from the control of the person who offended us. We're set free to see life clearly and to know God more fully. Forgiveness puts us in a place where God can heal us, both spiritually and physically. I know of people who were physically sick for a long time. Went to the doctor and everything, couldn't figure out how to kick it. As soon as they obeyed God and forgave people that they were offended with, God healed them physically. Not just inside, but physically. It's powerful. They were free from that pain. And though the process of forgiveness was painful, the result was incredible freedom. And these are the things that God wants for us if we just be willing to do it. The prison gate is right there. The key is in it. He says, just turn the key and walk through. It's called forgiveness. Turn the key and walk through. Next, forgive so that you can have a right relationship with God. You want God to smile in your life? Forgive those who've hurt you. Forgive as you've been forgiven. Offended people have a difficult time connecting with God. Let me tell you, I know this to be true. They have a hard time hearing his voice and sensing his presence. They feel like there's an invisible wall between them and God. And maybe you're here today, and that describes where you're at with God. You've felt spiritually dry. Maybe you're numb inside, hardened, unable to sense God's presence like you have before or like you really want to. You see other people enjoying a time of worship, or you see other people really connecting with God and praying. You're like, I want that. How come I can't have that? Why don't I feel that? Maybe there's someone that you need to release and forgive. And all of a sudden, it opens up the channels, opens up the lines to God. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's a lot. And maybe God's revealing to you what he wants you to do and who he wants you to forgive. He desires to meet you where you're at, and he wants to heal you. He wants you to be right with him, to hear his voice, to sense his presence, his peace. And he's saying, this is it. Now, for those here who are not Christ followers, God does not require that for you to come to him. He says, come to me, whatever you are. Okay? And then I'll deal with you. But for those who are Christ followers, he says, this is what's going to get in the way of my relationship with you. Does that make sense? Okay? I hope that makes sense. Those who aren't Christ followers, and it's unconditional. Man, you come in, and Jesus comes into your life. You don't have to clean yourself up first. He does that. And then he comes into your life, and then he starts dealing with us with these things. But those who have chosen to follow Christ, and if we knowingly are walking this way, it is going to be hard to connect with him. Very difficult. So let's see, where are we at here? Times in my own life, even recently, where that's described me. Okay? I can be so incredibly stubborn. I can be an idiot sometimes. But I'm so glad that God is not just patient with me, bless you, but that he also tells me the truth and not just what I want to hear. Well, let's look at what it takes quickly to forgive. What does it take to get free? Because as you and I both know, forgiveness, especially the deep wounds, is never easy. But it's never impossible either. It's always a choice. Where God calls us to rise above what we feel and we do what's right. So let's look at getting free real quick. I'm going to run through these. First, confess your offense. Okay? Holding people in unforgiveness is sin. It's wrong. It's justified contempt and hate. It's everything opposite of who God is. And the first step is to confess that sin to God. Don't deny it. God, I've been offended, and I've been holding this. Don't let pride rise up and mask it. Confess it. Ask God's forgiveness. And ask him to help you to extend forgiveness to the person who hurts you. Okay, so that's the first thing we do. We have to involve God in this process. In fact, maybe you're offended with God. I know that I've been offended with God before. Upset that he didn't answer prayer, that he allowed certain things into my life that I didn't want. He can handle that, but he wants us to confess it. Then go to the person you're offended with and confess your offense to them and ask for their forgiveness. I can't do that. That person hurt me. Yeah, but you're sinning against them just as much as they have done against you. Take that step. That's huge. It's hard. Okay? Now, this doesn't just happen overnight. Oh, all right, let's go do that. Okay? No, I mean, it takes some work and some process. Grab someone to come alongside to pray with you about it, okay? Not to gossip with, but to pray with you about it and to help you through. But a number of years ago, I read a book called The Bait of Satan. Sounds creepy, but it's actually a book about forgiveness, and I remember being struck through the heart after I read it. And there was a pastor who I served under who basically made my life miserable a number of years ago. Wounded me deeply. I was angry, I was hurt, our relationship ended on a bad note. I realized that not only was I offended, but that there were things that I did wrong in the process too, when we parted ways. And though some years had passed, and though we had never tried to repair anything, I had to take care of things on my end after reading this book. And so I called him, and I asked him to forgive me for the offense that I had been holding on to. And that he would forgive me from how I mishandled things. And not only did he forgive me, but then he also asked me to forgive him. And talk about freedom. Now every time I think about him, it's not in a negative light. I generally love that man and appreciate him. And things have been healed. And I have no animosity whatsoever in my heart. And that feels good. There's freedom. There's healing. Next, choose to release that person from debt. And don't wait for the feeling either. Okay? I don't know about you, but I don't like heights. They freak me out. Okay? But I like adventure. And so, as a youth pastor, when I was a youth pastor, I'd take groups, we'd go cliff jumping or bridge jumping. Okay, not into concrete, but into water. All right, it wasn't that stupid. And we're not talking super high, just about 30 to 40 feet up, and which to me might as well be 400 feet. But I can honestly tell you that no matter how many times I jumped into that water off that ledge, there was never a time that I actually felt like jumping. Okay, I was scared stiff every single time. Then when I would see a junior high girl take the leap before me, I just had to make the choice, right? But if I were to wait until I felt like jumping, I'd still be standing there today. And Wendy wouldn't be with me. Anyway, so when it comes to forgiveness, make the choice regardless of feelings. And make it again and again and again if you have to. Sometimes it's a process that takes repeating over and over again. But it won't happen because you feel like it. It happens only because you choose. Next, it'll get better. It'll get better. Next, pray for the person that you've chosen to forgive. And this is part of the process. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we looked at Jesus' instruction to love our enemies and pray for those who hurt us. But pray good things for them, genuinely. Don't pray that they'll get into a car wreck or that the airplane, gets hijacked by terrorists or, that's not good. Okay, I just got to say this. I hope no one's offended by this. There was a Facebook post that was just awesome. Someone said this, and that person knows who they are. They put on Facebook, my pastor said I'm supposed to pray for people that wrong you. Yet you can't wish ill on them. So here it goes. To the tool bag that decided to take a Sunday drive on a Monday morning, I pray that you get your eyes checked because clearly you cannot see the sign that said 35 and not 15. Anyway, I just thought it was a step in the right direction, and that was just great. I mean, I just love it. They're praying positively for this person. It was just so cool. But prayer softens our heart and allows God to work in us the process of healing He wants for us. And last, be reconciled to that person. Now, it doesn't always work out. Okay? Oftentimes the person we try to reconcile with has issues, right? They don't want to reconcile. It's their loss, but it's your gain that you're free. In fact, here's what the book of Romans says this. It says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. In other words, do your part. I know we can't control everyone else, but do your part. As far as it depends on you, live at peace. And I'm just going to close with this story. And I think it was I told this story about a year or so ago. Friends of ours in Santa Cruz, who they actually more friends of Wendy's. I don't know them very well. They went to a church that we went to, and their teenage daughters, went to a concert at the beach, a Christian concert in Santa Cruz. And as they were driving home, they got into a car wreck. They were hit by a drunk driver, killed both their daughters. They were their only daughters. You can imagine the pain that went through this family. The heartache. Why? God, why'd you have to allow this? Why'd you have to take them? Why couldn't it be someone else? Why did this person have to be drinking and driving? And so, long story short, this woman who was drunk, who was driving, she got arrested and put in jail. And I can't remember how long she was in jail for, but she was looking at getting released. Is that right? She was getting released. Her time was up. And so the parents of these girls found out that she was getting released. So they went down on the day that she was getting released to the jail. And they could have easily ripped her up one side and down the other. They had every right to do that. Instead, they told her, we want you to know that we forgive you for what you did to us and to our daughters. And the driver broke down and wept in complete humility and gratitude. No, it didn't bring back their girls, but it did bring them freedom and the ability to move forward with their lives in faith that they will see their girls again. Powerful. And today, this family is one of the most generous, loving, full of peace and God's presence couples that you will ever meet. And it's because, I believe, they took Jesus 490 and then some statement seriously. And they have learned how to truly live. Let's stand and we're going to pray and then we're going to eat. It's a good thing. But let's bow our heads this morning just in honor to God and to each other, and let's pray. Even as we're quiet in our hearts before God, maybe some of this is hitting you, and you've been offended. Maybe it's by one person, maybe it's by many, and it could be deep. And I really hope that nothing in this talk minimizes that whatsoever. Jesus knows. And Jesus knows how much it is to us, how much it means to us. But he does ask, will you let it go? Will you confess that? Confess that sin. And let me in and let me help you. Not me, Jesus is saying that. I have freedom for you. And I want you free. There's so much more I want you to experience. I want clear communication with you. I want your heart soft and vulnerable like it once was. Will you be willing to release that person? God, I thank you for your very challenging words that are painful to think about us walking through with these things. But Jesus, you spoke these things because you know their power. The power to set free. The power to live. The power to be healed and to experience you. And God, I just lift up to you all of my brothers and sisters here, wherever they're at in their journey. God, you know. Any one of us who is dealing with offense, God, I just pray that you would come alongside and give the strength and the courage to confess that sin, to lay it before you, to invite you to help with the process of forgiveness. And I pray, God, that there would be people this morning who would be set free completely. And as they are set free, that they would experience your presence and experience your voice and a freedom and a weight just be lifted off their shoulders. I pray, God, for reconciliation. I pray, God, for healing and change of attitudes, healing the spirit and healing the body, whatever might come with that. And I thank you, God, for what you're doing and for how much you